routinized areas of life. So a more philosophical critique of rational choice is that these situationally determined calculating machines, which are the rational choice kind of actors, are hardly human in a broader sense, that as an action theory, this processing of information and calculation can hardly be called a real action. It is much more likely to appear like a passive movement. And one of the main, let's say, requirements of a fully fledged action theory in philosophy would be to say that a theory can at least make the distinction between actions and bodily movements. And here, the rational choice theory might be lacking this kind of distinction in its theory. It might also be less adequate in describing us as human beings, because as human beings, I refer here to Michael Quandt, a German philosopher, we understand ourselves as persons. Persons, for instance, are characterized by being able to narrate one's own biography, right? You can write your own biography. You are defined by communicative practices with others. Persons can also recognize others as persons, and they are recognized as persons also by others. And in that process, at least if you follow Mead, there is a personhood emerging in that social interaction. And we can reasonably doubt whether a rational choice actor in that sense really disposes of personhood. In the rational choice biography of oneself, there is just a sequence of processes, of calculations that hardly corresponds to a fully fledged notion of personhood in this stronger philosophical understanding. Relatedly, also, we saw this in the discursive dilemma. Let's say, human decision-making is not necessarily computational processing, but it also involves deliberation. Moral deliberation, for instance, is about weighing not just the utility numbers, but also considering a moral argument. For instance, whether in the discursive dilemma, the epistemic norms should rule and prime over the more ethical norms. And this may be called the process of deliberation, right, where you carefully also reflect certain arguments, which is a very different process when compared to sort of computational processing, the understanding of actors that rational choice theory sort of suggests. Last but not least, despite all of these critics, which I find relatively reasonable to make, as sociologists, we could still say that rational choice theories, and in particular, their, let's say, outgrowths in reality, have to be taken seriously, because following the Thomas theorem here, whatever actors define as real may be real in their consequences. That is, if we have economists consulting governments, if we have economic consultants in companies, or also suggesting sort of what universities should do in order to become good companies, then the very arcane economic models actually enter out of academia. They go out of academia and enter also the real world. And Michel Calon, the French sociologist, then is known for this performativity approach, which argues that even though economic models may be empirically false and bad descriptions of reality, they may perform reality, right? They may define reality, and thus even make themselves true. And this is why sociologists, despite all of this theoretical criticism, are probably well advised to take these models seriously as a social phenomenon. So let us briefly summarize some of the main features of rational choice theories along our different dimensions. We saw, first of all, that rational choice is epistemologically clearly a positivist, objectivist kind of theory. So little doubt about this. When it comes to the explanatory level, we are dealing here with this micro-foundational idea that individual level causal explanations are the best kind of explanation in town. Methodologically, this is actually a very interesting question. So there is, on the one hand, obviously this envy that rational choices have for the natural sciences. So in that sense, they are rather methodological monists. But if they sort of go to the very extreme micro-foundation, that is reducing the, let's say, psychological rational actor model to, let's say, more neuroscience explanations of human actions, because they are even more micro founded, then this would imply that rational choice eventually abolishes itself. And for this reason, I think it is fair to say that at the end of the day, let's say, a social scientist defending rational choice rather is in favor of a methodological dualism. The main explanandum in this theory is probably how are best social and economic outcomes reached. Where originally it was only about economic outcomes, then also about social outcome. How many children, right, should you have? And sort of cost-benefit analysis, as Gary Becker would suggest, then this is just a question of utility. And the answer to these kind of questions then in rational choice is that you can derive the answers from individually rational choices, or in game theory also strategic interdependence then of these choices. Yes, I mentioned already the somehow ambiguous status of the theory between sort of being just a heuristic, descriptive model, or even a normative kind of model. Yes, depending on the reading, it can be anything. It's relatively clear that if it is normative, then it rather follows an economic utilitarianism, where, yes, in a way, a higher utility, often interpreted as higher salary, higher economic monetary benefit, higher GDP, is better than a lower value. Yes, ontologically, that's pretty clear. It's an atomist kind of ontology. There are only individuals in the world. There's no such thing as society, as Margaret Thatcher put it. And yes, we already saw also in the economic institutionalism that anthropologically we are talking about a theory that starts from an egoistically minded, rationally calculating agent. Okay, we leave it here. Have a great day.